Joshua 3:7 through 17. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to make you great in the opinion of all Israel. Then they will know that I will be with you in the same way that I was with Moses. You are to command the priests who carry the covenant chest. As soon as you come to the bank of the Jordan, stand still in the Jordan." Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come close, listen to the words of the Lord your God." Then Joshua said, "This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and will completely remove the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites before you. Look, the covenant chest of the ruler of the entire earth is going to cross over in front of you in the Jordan. Now pick 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one per tribe. The soles of the priest's feet who are carrying the chest of the Lord, ruler of the whole earth, will come to rest in the water of the Jordan. At that moment, the water of the Jordan will be cut off. The water flowing downstream will stand still in a single heap. Marching across the Jordan, the people marched out from their tents to cross over the Jordan. The priests carrying the covenant chest were in front of the people. When the priests who were carrying the chest came to the Jordan, their feet touched the edge of the water. The Jordan had overflowed its banks completely, the way it does during the entire harvest season. But at that moment, the water of the Jordan coming downstream stood still. It rose up as a single heap very far off, just below Adam, which is the city next to Zarethan. The water going down to the desert sea, that is the Dead Sea, was cut off completely. The people crossed opposite Jericho. So the priests carrying the Lord's covenant chest stood firmly on dry land in the middle of the Jordan. Meanwhile, all Israel crossed over on dry land until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan. Let's pray. Dear God, may my words be of you, and those words that are not of you fall upon deaf ears. Amen. I made a huge culinary blunder this past week. For those who don't know, I'm not the best of cooks. I try very hard, and there are certain things that I do very well, but I cook about the same few things all the time. And one of those things is that I grill out very often. As someone who is not that great of a cook, I can grill things. I can slap things on the grill and have them come out edible. And so the other day I was grilling and brought my tools in. The other day I decided that they needed to be cleaned and was bringing them in, and I noticed this one little ant on my grills. And I wasn't really worried about it. I looked at it, I was like, oh, I probably should do something about that, but it's okay. It'll just wash out when I wash it. Famous last words. I set the tools in the sink until I could get to them, and that little sucker must have been the fastest little guy ever, because somehow he disappeared. And once again, I thought, no big deal, it's only one. But you can probably guess what happens next. The next morning, I woke up to a sink full of ants. Now, my mother once told me that the Bible tells us to have dominion over the animals, and that this definitely goes for insects. So I don't hunt or fish, but I do take that very seriously when it comes to insects. Molly, my dog, does as well. We're very biblical, Molly and I. And so what I did was what every rational human being who has ants in the sink would do, and I grabbed my bleach, and I went after every last one of them. Cleaned everything out. Cleaned all the dishes out, put them in the, not that I ever have dishes in my sink, but if I did, I would have cleaned them out, put them in the dishwasher, ran through the dishwasher, cleaned off all the countertops, and apparently I missed a spot. Because after I had successfully killed off all the ants, went to bed, came back the next morning, and thought that I had successfully killed them until I realized that I had missed my blender, where I had spilled smoothie all over my blender earlier and had apparently missed a spot. Those ants know if you missed a spot, by the way. And so I see my blender, and it's overflowing with ants again. So I did the same process all over again. Went at them with bleach and bleached the blender, put the blender in the dishwasher, or well, the part that can go in the dishwasher. Put it in the dishwasher, bleached down the blender, and thought that I had them. Still didn't have them. They found another spot. I now have ant traps all over my kitchen, in case you were wondering. But that's how ants work, and we know this very well. If they aren't finding what they need in one place, they'll move on to the next. They're pretty resilient that way. And when they do move on, it usually happens that there are in fact more of them, annoyingly much, than when they started. It only took one of those little suckers to start the process, and soon they were invading my kitchen. When we talk about Joshua, we're talking about a bit of an ant invasion. Now, of course, as biblical scholars like to do, there are a few different theories as to how Joshua and the people took over the land. There are some believe that it was in full conquest style, that all of a sudden Joshua comes with his army and invades the city. There's some that believe that it was a slow process, that it was a slow overtaking, that years in the process. And still others believe that it came from within, that, the spies that were sent, there were people who were within the community that revolted within the land of the persons who were already in there. But it doesn't really matter, because Scripture tells us that there were 2 spies sent first and the rest follows. Kind of like that first little sucker of an ant who told all of his little ant friends where my smoothie was. It started with 1, Joshua, and it continued with 2, the spies, and then a third, the prostitute, until the land was taken over. 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, God's promises always start small. They started with Adam and Eve, just 2 in the garden, and then they started with Noah, then Noah's family, and then all the animals. They started with Moses, and then all the Israelites, and now here we are with Joshua. Joshua, then the spies, then Rahab, and then a full invasion. God's promises always start small, and then they gain power from there. Because God is always in control, and God is always faithful. God is to be trusted. If we think about it, we have the story of both Moses and Joshua, who were told by God to go out and do some crazy and big things. And looking around, they're on their own in many ways. Help will come, of course, but at the beginning it seems very lonely. It seems a little hopeless. It seems that the task of following God might be a difficult one, particularly when they can't see the end point. But God made a promise to Moses that he would not see, but that would be fulfilled through Joshua later on. It started small and it grew, and then it kept going. There's something huge about starting something and then it keeps going after you're gone. There's something about being a part of a legacy. When I was in college, I was part of a committee that raised money for the Children's Hospital in Columbia called Dance Marathon. It was 24 hours of line dancing and bands and other entertainment, and each dancer was required to raise $150. So as a college event, we raised more money every year by recruiting more dancers and more sponsors. The year I was on executive committee, we worked especially hard. You see, 2 years prior, a member of the committee had died. Not only had his death saddened and shaken up the entire group, but when we left, he also left a gap. When he left, he also left a gap that no one could quite fill in terms of how amazing of a fundraiser he was. The year after he died, the fundraising total decreased by about $20,000. Needless to say, that committee was disappointed. All the while, we were thinking it's amazing how much of an impact one person can make. We worked hard that year the year that I was on the committee, to raise more money than the year prior. And not only did we achieve that, but we broke the record for this particular marathon, raising almost $85,000. We were very excited, to put an understatement on it. But soon we were joking about how we wished that we had hit that 6-figure mark. And so the next year we returned as alumni, and I watched them reveal the number. They had beaten us. I'll admit I was a little upset. How were they able to do it when we weren't? Well, it was because we were all a part of this legacy. One that might start with just one person that will continue to go on and improve year after year. And so this year, 11 years after I have graduated, they are aiming to raise $500,000, and they will probably hit it. It makes our $85,000 look like a little pocket change. It hurts a little that I'm not the one doing it. They'll gather around in February, and I will probably not be there. And if I'm not, nobody will know the difference. They won't care that I don't show up. And it's kind of sad to think about it. But I know that I was part of the start. It's joyous that from the work that I did, along with the rest of the committee, this legacy keeps going on. God made a promise to Moses, and he fulfilled it with Joshua. The land is Israel's. If I was Moses, I might be a little sad to not be the one with whom God fulfilled the promise. All of this work, and he doesn't get to see the end. But Moses was part of the promise, and that's big enough. All of us have been called to this legacy laid out before us by God. It's not for us to hold to ourselves, but to pass down to others. And time after time again, we see how God fulfills promises from generation to generation. Adam and Eve were just two, but they started a movement. After the flood, we were left with just Noah's family, but they started a movement. Finally, Jesus was one who recruited 12, and they together started a movement. Movements begin with us, but they don't end with us unless we let them. Outside these doors today, at home, on the streets and restaurants, are gathered today people who are called to be a part of the movement that is the gospel of Jesus Christ. But they don't know it yet. Maybe they don't know it because they haven't really listened. Maybe they don't know it because we haven't told them. Worse yet, maybe they don't know it because they don't think they're good enough. They think the gospel is only for saints, when in fact it's for sinners. But I know what you may be thinking. Maybe I'm the one that's not good enough. Maybe I'm not the one who is called to move. Maybe I'm too old or too young. Maybe I don't speak well enough, or I don't know enough about the Bible. Maybe I drank too much last night. Maybe I have a past that I'm ashamed of. But the fact is, story after story has been told of the people God called to be a part of the legacy. And only one of them was perfect. Adam and Eve didn't do as they were told. David was too young. Sarah was too old. Paul rebuked Christians. Rahab was a prostitute. None of us are good enough without God's grace. None of us are worthy of God's grace. But that's what makes it grace. The inadequacy of us and the adequacy of God. More than adequacy, in fact. The thing about legacies is that they aren't done alone. One person does not make a legacy. Legacies last infinitely, passed down from generation to generation. We are not the ending, and God is just getting started with us. But most importantly, we are not the most important. It's hard to take at times. God uses us because he wants to, not because he has to. Just like the ants that have invaded my kitchen, God will find a way to use what he has where he has. But God looks for the willing. The ones wanting to serve him, the ones willing to go where it takes. I want to be one of those. Will you join me?